You might want to save your applause, I might be incredibly boring. So I just wanted to talk before we sort of, show you some of the stuff that we've been up to, a little bit about the collaboration that Yuen and I have started, and talk about the power of having a cup of coffee. After one of the Learning Space tours that I led in Brisbane and Melbourne, I came back from that sort of buzzing as you do from these kinds of experiences, thinking we really need to make some changes here at UWS, particularly in the area of learning spaces. Certainly. I'm used to being quite loud. Is that better?
That's great.
Okay. So, as I say, when I came back from that kind of experience, I just thought we really need to get together and do something about that. And knowing that I couldn't do that on my own, I gave Yuen a ring, because Yuen has done some great work already in the area of learning space refurbishments. Some of the fantastic new lecture theatres and spaces you see around the university are as a result of her work. And she also sets the standards for teaching spaces more generally across the university. And so I thought she would be a good person to get in touch with. And so we decided to get together for a cup of coffee, and we huddled around some seating in Parramatta, as I recall. And we were so immersed in our conversation, we didn't really have our cup of coffee, did we? So I owe you a coffee still. So Yuen was really keen to do something around social learning spaces, and I really wanted to do something around teaching spaces. And so we made a kind of pact that we would do something, not sure what it was, but we were definitely going to do something. And we got in touch with Kerry Lee Krause and asked for some direction. And she pointed us in the direction of School of Business, School of Nursing over in Parramatta. And so we had an interesting interaction with a group of academics from those schools. And we stood in front of them, brimming with enthusiasm, and said, look, Capital Works ID services are here, seeking your feedback. Tell us what you think about the spaces here at Parramatta. And I think it's fair to say we took a bit of a bashing. So the two of us kind of stood and looked at our feet for about 20 minutes, like scolded children, but just took on board all of the feedback that we'd had, particularly about the spaces in Parramatta EB building. So I don't know if anybody here is familiar with those. Anybody taught in those buildings? So you know what I'm talking about? And so on the back of that, Yuen and I kind of looked at each other and we said, right, well, we're going to do something about that. We can't do the whole building, but we'll probably take maybe 5 or 6 spaces, and we'll make some big changes. And so that's what we did. And we went to Rhonda Hawkins, because we didn't have any money, and said, look, this is what we want to do. And we put forward a very passionate pitch for 6 spaces. Sarah Denise had worked with us on the design, and we said we wanted to refurbish the whole of the 3rd floor on Parramatta EB. And we were with a view to getting some money for this year, getting something done this year. And Rhonda said, yeah, okay, you can have the money, but I want you to do it now. And this was about August, September, something like that. And she said, can you get it done by the end of the year? So I flicked a glance back over at Yuen, and she sort of went, yep. And so we've just finished a piece of work on the 3rd floor at Parramatta, and we'll show you a couple of pictures of that. We'll talk about that in a moment. So
Sorry if I could interject, we did Bankstown, Campbelltown.
Oh, we did Bankstown and Campbelltown too. Yeah, that's true. So I don't know, I think we've got a limited number of pictures here, but we've probably got others that we can show you if you're interested later. So I guess the question really is, I've talked about space matters in terms of blended learning, and I guess the question is really, why does it matter? And it matters for all of these reasons. There's a great deal in the literature that talks about how important space is when you think about blended learning, and just learning in general. We've got some common platforms in the university, so we have views, and my colleagues can talk about that in more detail. But we've got some other common platforms too. So we have the iPads, which are on their way. So, a third of our students have those, our academic staff have those, and, our strategy is that we will be making that a common platform. But the other common platform we often overlook in terms of blended learning is the teaching space. So we all have access to those. And the question needs to be asked is, are our teaching spaces fit for purpose when we think about a more constructivist view of learning? And I think the answer is probably no. So I guess a question to you, what did your suburb look like 100 years ago? So, if you don't mind me picking on you.
It was gold, and it didn't have as many houses.
Didn't have as many houses. So if you took somebody from 100 years ago and brought them into your suburb now, do you think they'd know where they were? No idea. In my suburb in Kellyville, just even 10 years ago, was just all agricultural land. Right now, I don't want to get into a debate about whether the change was good or not, but change is inevitable. Unless you're talking about teaching spaces. So this is the Abel Smith Lecture Theatre in UQ. I couldn't find one from 100 years ago, but I'd be willing to bet if it existed, it still looked like this. And I listened to a talk from Professor Philip Long, who talked about this phenomenon. Because in 2011, where I heard Philip Long give his presentation, that is what the lecture theatre looked like. And it's more or less the same. So nothing has resisted change quite as much as a teaching space. Now, I don't know why that is. It's certainly not because it's a system that works really, really well. It's designed for efficiency and not effectiveness. I think there are some other drivers. In addition to our desire to introduce new pedagogies, there are technology expectations that are driving the need for the way in which we design and implement our teaching spaces. We have a wide variety of students and devices. They want to interact with us in a different way to what they did even 5 years ago. There are a number of assumptions about the wireless capacity which we need to make sure that we manage and understand. And there's work going on, working with Dennis and Lene and others to develop a technical roadmap for blended learning so that you will have an idea about what you can use, how you can use it, and what's on its way. So there's a fair bit of work that needs to be done there. Students with disabilities need access to our spaces. Right? A number of our spaces are not very accessible. And they have expectations of technology too that have an impact on the way in which we interact with our spaces. Staff don't want complicated spaces to use. They don't want complicated technology to use. And that's a challenge for me and certainly the feedback they had in that sort of, 20 minutes of leathering that we had was, these horrible, scary white boxes that we have in the teaching spaces there are really difficult for us to use and they're awful. Can you get rid of them? And my answer was, okay. And if we think about the nature of disruptive technology, right? So how many of you in the room have an iPad? Like I can see a bunch of them now. Right? So how many of you would like to manage without your iPad? Nobody. You're in love with your iPads already. Yeah. It is a disruptive technology. But here's the thing, right? It didn't exist 3 years ago. It didn't exist 3 years ago, and now there are 15 million or more worldwide. There are 700,000 apps available for the iPad, right? So, we're supposed to know all of that stuff. I spoke to somebody earlier on who referred to that as trying to drink out of a fire hydrant. It is really, really tough to keep up to date with that. And even audiovisual technology ain't what it used to be. So does everybody know what this is? The Google Glass. I so want some of these. So this is what audiovisual technology looks like now. It's not necessarily this stuff. So we really have got to make some changes, and our teaching spaces are not keeping up. And that's really the key message. So I hand over to you.
You can continue if you want.
You know, okay. We've done quite a lot of work on these spaces.
Okay, so this is what we started with in EB. So clashing whiteboards with projection screens, tutor-led arrangement, static rows of seats facing the front, no encouragement to group learning at all.
That's it, that's one.
So tutor-led and designed for efficiency, and as Sarah would say, a number of bums on seats. How many can we get in there, and how can we get as many as possible in there to...
Do you want to talk about this space as well? Because
Yeah.
the bumps on seats issue has been a real challenge for us, actually.
Bankstown, this lecture theatre and the one next door were tagged for blended learning teaching spaces refurbishment at the end of last year. So at the same time as Parramatta EB was being rolled out, we were looking at these two spaces as well. Now, I've done a quick count. We've got about 60 seats here. In a collaborative learning layout, we dropped down to about 35. So it's about half. And because of that, that was a block for timetabling to allow the space to be converted to a blended learning space or a collaborative teaching space, which was a real shame because we had great ideas for it. We were going to do a lectorial. So it was a lecture theatre come tutorial room. So the first for the university, really.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the numbers just didn't allow us to do that at that point in time. So we're hoping to work with everyone, academics, timetabling, to work around that so that we can get a more up-to-date, I guess, teaching space and learning space. So those of us who've used EB or Campbelltown 2 or 10 or 20 in Bankstown would have come across a space something like this. So we went from that very consciously to that, where we've had groups of maximum 6 per table, 4 minimum. We cater for disability access. We consciously didn't do the pull-down screen in front of the writing surfaces, so the writing surfaces are separated from the pull-down screen. We reworked the AV desk so that it's, and I'll leave that to Sarah to talk about.
Yeah, so there's an example of the scary white box there in the corner. That's what some of the academics call it, right? So that's what we're calling it now. And so we moved to a slightly more usable setup there. And there's a phone, there's a network PC in there. You don't have to bring your laptop if you really don't want to. And this is before we decided to roll out iPads. So we're also going to go back and do some work to make sure that people can use their iPads in these spaces. So it's a lot more usable.
The other thing we responded to was the lecturers requested a place to sit, because in these rooms they have to stand. So we included a high chair in there behind the lectern. Another big change to this space is the inclusion of charging stations. So we understood that laptops, mobile devices were now being used by everybody, students. So we don't have a picture here, but at the corner at the back, we've got a station with about 8 or 9 shelves where kids can charge their devices during class, should they need to. So this becomes a more student-focused layout. Talking to Farid, he now finds this a more group learning-friendly space as opposed to that sort of space. Lends much better to the group-style learning.
And you know, students get a clear, you know, if you walk into that kind of space, psychologically you're not ready for a kind of collaborative experience, right? So, and you know, and there's various bits of research about that.
I think it depends on the nature of the instruction, right? In some courses or some units, they need group learning. Some, they need to follow what the lecturer is writing, and in this case, I'm taking history.
Yeah.
But since I have to do, I do theory and application. I write a lot of formulas and doing a little bit of maths on the board. So, you know, sometimes I feel that those students who are sitting there in the front, they are having their backs on the black whiteboard. So there's a bit of problem for them.
There are writing surfaces all the way around that space though, so you know, in terms of flexibility, you can, you know, you've got a lot more, and this furniture is all movable, so you can move a lot of that furniture. But psychologically, students are a lot more ready for a collaborative experience in this new space.
I guess to add to your point there, this is one projection surface, and this room in particular has 2 projection surfaces, one in the front and one in the back. So whatever you're projecting up, the person sitting there will be able to look at it at the back of the room as well. So that writing surfaces,
whiteboards.
understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
derive diagrams and things.
Yeah.
So if we think about a learning experience as being beyond the classroom, and I think we're all agreed that we do. So in addition to the formal teaching spaces, we've done a lot more work on informal teaching spaces so that we can provide students with opportunities to learn outside of the classroom and near to where their cohort spends time, and we had a lot of feedback from students. So we spoke to about 100 students in this area, and they gave us a huge amount of feedback about this kind of stuff. And so Yuen decided, right, we're going to do something about some of the social learning space too.
So this is just outside the teaching rooms we just saw. It's what we converted from a corridor, an empty corridor, to what we call a social learning space. So from that, we responded to the students who wanted group learning spaces, who wanted projection screen that they could plug
practice
in and
presentations and stuff.
do group work on and practice presentations, and writing surfaces. So these pods, we call them study pods, have the glass whiteboards there. That table has opportunities for power. They plug in, put the computer on, put a USB stick in there, and project their work up on there. So this is in this corridor of EB.
So in all the work that we've done, looking at lots of different examples of successful spaces versus not so successful spaces, some in the UK, some here in Australia, that we've identified a magic formula around group work. One is that they need a table, they need somewhere comfortable to sit, they need something to write on, which is what these partitions are, they're all writable surfaces, and something to present to. It doesn't have to be expensive, as long as you have that formula. You will find that students use that really. These are all packed out every time you go in there. So I don't know when you took these, like at 6 o'clock in the morning or something.
Before semester.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what's really exciting about this is that we're now in the process of identifying more spaces within each campus to do this sort of thing for the kids, or for students. So what's coming is, this is Sarah and I are very excited about. Coming from Angela's office, PPC students, there's an initiative to put in learning commons spaces. So I can just refer that, thanks. So it's space for students, space to meet, space to learn, space to socialise. So it kind of, ends up looking something like that, where it's open 24 hours a day and they can drop in, come in, and stay there all day if they want. It was the PVC's intent that all these spaces link back to the library, so however many learning commons spaces we have on a campus would link back to the library in terms of services and functionality. He also talked about a common language, and now what we're calling it is a pattern language throughout each of the learning commons spaces. So when you go in there, you expect certain things like movable furniture, whether it's soft type of furniture or formal spaces and group study pods. Plenty of writing surfaces that you can scribble on, LCD and cars, we're working on computers on wheels, Wi-Fi, PowerPoints for charging your devices, and a kitchenette to make coffee, tea, have lunch, etc. So these were the elements that are going to be common throughout each of the learning commons. So we've got two running now in tender and in construction in the next couple of months. One in Hawkesbury, next to the library in G1, and one in Parramatta, which is going to be right opposite the auditorium. So we're calling it the Pavilion. Hawkesbury is dedicated as a learning commons space for students, but Parramatta would be a shared space, predominantly learning commons, but certain times of the year it'll be used to exams and graduations and sometimes functions. So I guess I just wanted to, we wanted to share this with you because it's very exciting and it falls under the blended learning umbrella. I don't know if you want to add anything. No.
I think that we're intending to put one of these on every campus, so there is one intended here for Bankstown. Yeah, thank you. I don't know how many of you have seen this example of the space, often used to, as an exemplar in learning spaces. This is the advanced concept teaching space in UQ. And I've seen this photo in loads of places, a photo I took when I went to visit there. The reality of this space is that it cost about $1.5 million for one room. And it wasn't actually very successful. And the reason for that is that the focus entirely in this space was on the technology, not on the pedagogy. There was really very little engagement with academic staff in the design and development of this space. And there were all sorts of compromises made around this particular space. So if you look at all these tablets here, one of the great things about a tablet is you can pick it up and move it around. It's very mobile. It's a very personal thing. But they're all tethered in this space, which means most of the surface area here can't be used. And this just turned out to be a bit of a disaster, in actual fact. Right? It's kind of off the record, but that's the reality. And they're actually ripping all this out. And in fact, they may have already done that. So a lot of that stuff's been ripped out. So good concepts that came out of that was, if you're going to design a lecture theatre, have one where you've got 2 rows that are on the same tier, so you can actually get students to turn around and collaborate in small groups, right? So, if we have to design spaces for efficiency, then that's a great concept, which has fed into Yuen's thinking about the, what do you call them, the lectorial spaces, which you really want to do in this space. So, maybe we can have a chat about that.
Maybe after the space audit, they might see that it's not paid 60.
Maybe, let's hope. So I think what's fairly unique about what we're doing in UWS is that we're taking a much more collaborative and teamwork kind of approach. So in terms of space, Capital Works are taking the lead. So this is basically Yuen, and she's driving change within her own area too. So this is a cultural and practice change that we're all trying to be engaged with here. So in terms of space, lighting, furniture, these are all things that have to be designed holistically as part of the whole experience. I refer to it as the teaching technology toolkit, but it is the basic sets of technology tools that you should expect to see if you're an academic member of staff in every single teaching space. So it's a PC that's networked, it's a phone in case you need to ring for help, it's some basic projection facilities and something to write on. So there's some minimum threshold standards that we're putting in place and taken to the Education Committee in June based on all the feedback that we've had and some of the evaluations that we're doing. Hi.
Hi. One of my gripes with this campus is that a lot of the whiteboards have been put in front of the screen, so they're totally, you can't use it.
New standard? Not allowed to do that.
But can they be moved?
Yes, yes, yes. So we do have some plans to do some of that, some retrospective work. There are 400 teaching spaces across the university, so it's a big task, and I can't give you a firm date as to when all that's going to be done, but we are planning to go back and do some of those things. Yes, absolutely, because that is a pet, that is possibly the #1 complaint that we've had about our spaces. Yes? You're talking about the pull-down screens?
No, the whiteboards.
Oh yes, absolutely, yeah.
One building 20, I can only reach about this time.
Yes, so they are now positioned at an appropriate height. We'll bring Yuen in because she's quite short, and if she can ride on it. So they have to be, it's difficult to get right, so you have to get somebody who's really, really short and also somebody who's really, really tall to kind of get it right, but yes, absolutely. That's right, yeah. So, yeah, we'll give you some beautiful. How about some beautiful new platform shoes, maybe issued with all female short. And
I was just wondering, have you looked at the wall paint that is actually, so you don't need an additional magnetic whiteboard, you use the whole wall as a whiteboard?
We have looked at that. It's not very successful, and I'll explain why, because it's very difficult to clean. So we've experimented with this a bit, and what we're standardising on now, which is a wee bit more expensive, is glass. Glass is really, really easy to clean. So there's nothing more, annoying. Like this is a great example. This has been probably really thoroughly cleaned, but you can still see the shadows of what was there before. A bit of a nightmare. And sometimes when you get one of those pens and you get your thing and you just, and it's still there.
And you can afford to put it over more of the wall then. It's not
Yeah, so we have experimented a bit with the paint, not so successful, but glass is really good, and we're standardising on that. And also, in some of the spaces we've seen up and down the country, that glass has been used in some of the most successful spaces. So thanks for asking that. But we're also engaging, the biggest part of this machine is in terms of curriculum redesign. So we've reached out to Lene and others in the area of e-learning. In terms of the work that we've done in the most recent spaces, we ran workshops with the schools and made sure that we got their input. And things like, we had originally proposed quite large, in the social learning spaces, for example, quite large tables with about 8 chairs around those. And so the feedback from academic staff, particularly in the School of Nursing and School of Business, is, can you make them smaller? Because in general, you know, the students will be in groups of 3 or 4. And so we also configured the circular tables like that. So they had options around, you know, square tables, rectangular tables, round tables, and what they opted for was the round tables. And so, and then getting input on sort of discipline-specific needs. So standards are really important because we don't want to be changing the environment from room to room to room to room to room. It's very difficult to design your learning based on, am I going to get timetabled in this particular space because I need this particular kind of setup, or I need this particular type of technology, and then the following semester you found you're timetabled into some daggy old room with only an OHP. So, you know, if we're going to expect people to make that commitment, then we have to provide some standards. But in addition to that, we have sort of room in our standards to incorporate discipline-specific activities and discipline-specific sort of technology too. So, for example, in the School of Education, their school-specific technology is smartboards, and so we've integrated into the design of some of the spaces that they use the smartboards. I've done some here and also at Kingswood, but it's still a space that can be used by anybody. Those standards are still in place. In terms of the social learning space too, we've taken a lot of feedback from students to understand how they intend to use some of the spaces and how they want to learn independently. So we've taken a lot of feedback. And we're doing review and evaluation, which then feeds into the next iteration of standards. So doing things like some observations, some teaching observations, getting some formal feedback. We're pairing up with QUT, who are doing similar evaluations, and so we're doing some research and collaboration there, which Lene has very kindly agreed to lead for us. So there's a very cohesive teamwork approach to that, and I'm sure we can do better. And I was talking to Anne earlier on. I'm going to rope Anne into our little team. So I just wanted to share this bit of feedback for you. And the lady who sent this bit of feedback had given us that leathering that I talked about earlier on. So she had really kind of, you know, given it to us in that very cathartic way that was, and nothing she said to us was not true, was it? But she sent me an email. In fact, she sent Sarah an email who forwarded it on to me. Sorry?
Has you got timetabled into this room?
No. No. They got first dibs.
It's very difficult when you get timetabled.
It is. But you know what's great is that we're generating demand, and people are now saying, I don't want to go into these other rooms, can you know, and that's where we really need the help of the academic community, right, to help drive some change. Because Yuen and I, as determined and as pushy as we are, and we're only 2 women, and we really need a much broader support to drive this change. This is quite a big change program that we're talking about here. So if we want to make this happen, we need some support. But I just, you know, the bit that I liked here was this. These are the students as palpable at both an intellectual and intuitive level. It felt right, and a feeling only exemplified when I moved back into a more conventional tute space later today. So already the feedback that we're getting is we love these spaces. They really are making a contribution to our teaching experience and the learning experience. So, you know, I'm sure that we'll get some other feedback that says, you know, I don't like this bit and I don't like that bit, and we will feed that into our continual service improvement approach. But we were really chuffed when we got that, weren't we? So, just very quickly, and I know I've only got 1 minute left, so and then we'll throw open for some questions. I just want to share this to you. In addition to looking at a lot of higher education spaces, at the last learning space tour I did, I wanted to go and have a look in the primary and secondary education sector to see what was going on there in terms of new spaces. And this was the Northern Beaches Christian School. in Sydney, and this, I was so envious when I was a bit intimidated when I walked into this space, but this is a sort of Scandinavian kind of concept here. But this is actually a formal teaching session going on here. So this is not a social, this is not independent learning, you know, from outside the classroom. This is what's going on in a... Now, I would have loved this, because I'm a bit fidgety, as you've probably seen. And these girls are all, they're all visual learners, so they break their sessions up and they have different tasks. There's a lot of investment in terms of time, but they have tasks designed for different types of learners, visual learners, kinetic learners, and so on. And so they've got personalised learning going on in these spaces. It's a very, very successful approach here, and they've been doing it for about 6-7 years. And this is throughout the whole school. They've got a bring your own device policy, so they don't have, there was not a single smartboard I saw in this space at all, not one. All the students are using wireless. They bring their own devices, and they learn. And you'll also see that when the bell goes, so there's a little kind of bell that says right the end of the formal session is here. And like the vast majority of kids go running out, but some of the others don't. They just keep going because they're so engrossed in the learning experience. It's really a very exciting place. And if you ever have a chance to go, they do tours there. It is a really, really exciting place to see. So that, I think, is the future of what we've got to think about. We can resist that change if we like, but students will find their own way. So desire paths are something that will just happen whether we like it or not. And so I really feel that we should get ourselves ready for this kind of learning experience and start to design our curriculum and our spaces that will be ready for this kind of experience. And this is a picture of our own students, which is so similar, I think, to what was going on here. And this, I took this picture last week in our new social learning spaces. So it's kind of, the students are driving the change here. Okay. Am I on time?
Yes, and we have time for questions.
Oh, good. Sorry.
I'm sitting here thinking I'm very jealous and very envious of this because I come from Kingswood campus, and you didn't mention Kingswood campus, and we are feeling a little bit like the poor relations at the moment, because I would say none of this exists at Kingswood, and it is a really bad use of space in a lot of places. So are there plans to remember that Kingswood is part of it?
No, because we don't like you at Kingswood. Yes.
If I can respond to that, we've got a program of audits of potential spaces that would suit collaborative learning spaces. Not all teaching rooms at the moment are sized correctly for it. To do something like that, you need quite a much larger space. So, and Kingswood, Penrith is the first campus that we're auditing in 2 weeks to identify the spaces.
My second question is that it's a really great concept, but I have 400 students. I can't even fit them on Penrith. I have 400 students who change campuses to Wellington, and that creates... So how do I start getting my head around? Are they going to give me more money so I can split this into 10 groups of 40 people or something? But in your planning for these learning, how can we be creative but have a space that seats 500 people?
That's probably a question that Lene might be able to help with in terms of, you know, there are ways, I mean, some of those challenges are difficult to overcome, but we probably need to take some new approaches to the way in which we deliver our curriculum. So there's some opportunities for curriculum redesign. Did you want to comment on that, Lene?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we're very keen to work with academics and looking at other strategies that will help to deal with optimal use of technology and optimal use of space. And one of the most common strategies that some schools are looking at, nursing and midwifery, education and law, they're looking at flipped classrooms. Is that a term that's familiar with people? We're having a session next week, bit of cross promotion. Gina's running a session next week on flipped classrooms, and what that is that you focus more on the on-campus small tutorial-based activities, and there are a lot of activities that students do in their own time. But we can talk about that.
The other thing that will hopefully help is that we're working on a blended learning technical roadmap. I met with the managing director of Polycom yesterday to talk to him about how we can break down the geographic barriers of learning in our organisation, right? So this is difficult for very discipline-specific technologies and equipment, but for broader kind of subjects and learning kind of activities, it should be possible for the students to be wherever they want to be and then come into the learning experience, right? So we don't necessarily need to bring together 400 students in one space and then squirt content into them. We don't necessarily need to do that. That's not coming like next week or even, you know, halfway through the year. But I am working on that strategy to get the infrastructure in place so that we can do live streaming from one space to another space or wherever the students want to be, so they can consume, you know, the content or whatever in their own time. Sorry, I'll just...
On that very note, we're running some units next semester across 3 campuses, and one of the things we would really love to be able to do is in the lectures to have live streaming, so you have students in 3 locations who are mic'd in and actually actively participate and respond.
Yep.
So that they're not just sitting and listening, but they're participating in the lecture. Is that...
That is on its way, and if you could email me, I'll leave you my card and email me, because we will need to have some pilot groups that we can work with when we want to experiment with the technology, because sometimes we have to take a few risks, because otherwise everything takes forever to get going. So if you're prepared to experiment a little bit with us, then we can probably work with you on that. Anne?
What you're saying, and I don't know your name. I'm Anne Forster, and I'm coming in as the provost of Lithgow campus. I don't know how many of you know, but we're getting a Lithgow campus. So you're crossing the Blue Mountains, and it's a long way away from Penrith. And the way that we will leverage the classroom space there has to be a telepresence. So it will be synchronous and asynchronous linking when we begin to deliver the university courses. So we know that there's a high demand for business courses, for example, but there might only be a high demand in Lithgow. That means 5 people. There is no way that we're going to have, lecturers travelling all the way to teach a class, but to link them in using in the same technologies that are going to be needed to facilitate the inter-campus connectivity on the planes. That's really where we're heading. And the University of Western Sydney College is actually putting in a large number of programs which are the pathways programs leading into the university degrees. So they also need to be completely merged with the blended learning philosophy as those students transition into the university. And all of the developments, Felicity sitting next to me is part of the campus planning for Bankstown, for example. So there are many, I'm so excited about the opportunity we have to really spearhead these sorts of live streaming and interconnectivity.
Yep, absolutely. I'll work with you on that.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying that lecture theatre like this one, and the one across the way which I teach in, which is a little larger than this, to say that a complete overhaul would have the capacity perhaps of this to turn into sort of a real lectorial space. But we saw right at the start of this when Dennis encouraged us to sort of say hello to people, how difficult it was just sitting here, in a immovable chair to say hello front and backwards. So rather than converting anything, if timetabling for the foreseeable future requires all sorts of spaces to remain with a number of seats, can't we go sort of part way, sort of make at least chairs? You can turn chairs around, revolve them around, talk to people either side. So it makes it more interactive. I try to throw a lectorial style thing over the way, and it is very difficult in this sort of space. But if there is at least some, not a complete overhaul, but some changes to make it
So I think,
more interactive.
these are due for refurbishment anyway, so we've got to do something with these spaces, haven't we, next year? So come and talk to you about that.
Yeah, definitely. We know what it needs to be.
Okay. Felicity and then the lady.
Just following on from what Anne said, with the new building going on here, the AWS College building and a new building going on the River campus, I'm hoping that you're involved in making sure that these go in right from the start.
It is progressing at the moment. It's, I think Anne, you're across it. It's over since the beginning of the year. There's been a request for the blended learning teaching spaces configuration to be integrated into the UWS College new builds. We're working through that at the moment.
So So what we've been trying to do, this has been a big giant experiment for us, right? And for Yuen and I have had to kind of stick our neck out a little bit and take a few risks. And we're driving change in our own areas as well as in the university. And so we need that track record and credibility to be able to then to persuade our broader areas that, you know, that this is a good standard. And I think we've achieved that so far, but we need some more support from the academic community to say, yes, this is what we want, and yes, we are prepared to put the time and effort into rewriting our curriculum. We are prepared to try different things, and we will work with you with the reduced numbers to make some of these happen, because we have had to drop some projects because we just haven't had that consensus and agreement. And we can't force change, really. Well, you can, but it's not a very successful way of doing it. Yeah. So, lady at the back.
My question is to you. You mentioned pattern language, and I believe that probably it's more in architecture. So, do you develop the whole pattern language for a space design, or you adapt it from somewhere, or?
You mean the inclusions in all the learning commons spaces?
Yeah.
We took on. We worked on it together.
Yeah.
We consulted with students and their expectations of what they wanted in the space, and how they wanted to learn from each other. So things like the movable, flexible chairs that they could reconfigure to suit 2 people discussions or 10 people discussions. How they wanted to sit, whether it's on a formal chair or a lounge. Wi-Fi, for example, would be an expectation in there, and that's what they will get. Kitchenette, if you're there all night, you'd want somewhere to store.
Heat up a pie.
Yeah, heat up a pie. So, it's not, we didn't decide that this is what was we would be putting, but through lots of conferences, lots of observations of other universities, through talking with students, we came up with that menu, I guess.
So have you spoken to Latrobe as well?
Sorry?
Latrobe? No, we have not spoken.
Because they have, and that was my next question, was about furniture design. And like part of my PhD is about learning space and how, but my purpose is not just standalone learning space, but pedagogy-driven learning spaces, and having academics to think about how best to utilize the space that is available, because not necessarily always the space can suit my strategy. However, I can, like given setup, I can mold my strategy in such a way that I can best utilize whatever is available.
Yep.
It's like, you know, so LATCO has some like quite intensive research on furniture design as well, which is very light, foldable, movable. Because very heavy furniture also brings in some motion-less issues around it. And from my own like PhD work, somebody also said to me that for me the best like students group, the best learning space is having nothing in the class so that I can do whatever I want.
Yeah. Having the flexibility to do a number of those things. So having movable, lightweight furniture is a really, really important change for us. So that's, you know, yeah, I would. Are we going to have to? Yeah.
I'm going to have to call a time out on that. Please talk to Yuen and Sarah over morning tea. We're going to break for morning tea now for about 20 minutes, but will you please join me in thanking Sarah and Yuen? This is really exciting. Thank you.
Welcome.